On this edition of Independent Sources,
after the Arab Spring, reports of religious intolerance and infringement on press freedoms raise questions about progress in Egypt.
maternal mortality. Why are more African American mothers dying during and soon after pregnancy?
And music from the underground. Emerging artists vie for limited spots in New York's subway stations. Welcome to Independent Sources. I'm Viano Ravinka.
And I'm Gary Pierre-Pierre. A recent report from the Centers for Disease Control, CDC, showed that nationally, black women had a 4 times greater risk of dying during their pregnancy compared to white women. In New York, that ratio is about twice that amount.
The study cites high rates of obesity, high blood pressure, and inadequate prenatal care as some of the root causes to this trend. Although New York's figures are particularly disturbing, some experts have been concerned since the 1990s.
I spoke with journalist Rita Henley Jensen and Dr. Linda Burke-Galloway about this trend. Rita, for the last 3 years, you've been following the story of a high maternal rate among African American women. How has the story evolved or not evolved?
I think it has evolved. We're very proud of where we are now because now we have a sense of what we don't know. When we started, we covered the stories that were out there, the information that was out there. The statistics were nationally that African American women died 2 to 4 times more often than white women in the US. And that statistic didn't change. And as we began to research, we did the conventional stories, you know, please watch your weight. There was a lot of emphasis on the stress of racism that African American mothers bring to their pregnancy and historic lack of good health. There was a lot of emphasis on that, sort of explaining. But I asked around after a while and said, yes, but specifically, why are they dying 2 to 4 times more often? And there was no specific information. It was just general health. Oh, it's poverty. Oh, it's lack of prenatal care. Oh, it's lack of education. Oh, it's obesity. Oh, it's pre-existing conditions. There's all that, but then I'm like, exactly how? And what we came up with that there was no research.
Okay.
How? Until we got this one report from the city of New York that very specifically identified the reasons why African American women in New York City were dying 8 times more often than white women in the mecca of medical care with the public hospital system and clinics. 8 times, how could that happen?
Well, Dr. Burke-Galloway, how could that happen? You've been working on this issue very much for the last several years. Can you shed some light for us?
Well, part of the problem is that people are not paying attention in our healthcare system. When you look at the statistics regarding preterm labor, there are 4 million babies that are born each year, and about 12% of them are premature. And out of that subset, a tremendous percentage of the preterm babies are born to African American moms. And then you look at the statistics that Rita has expressed, the maternal mortality rate of 4 times greater for African American women than for anyone else. And so what's glaring is that the ethnicity of African American women is a high-risk condition. So unfortunately, my colleagues do not approach African American women from that perspective. So I think that initially needs to be understood, that as an African American woman, you are more at risk for high-risk conditions, and therefore you should be treated as such. It's a huge topic, and I'm going to try to narrow it down as best I can in the short period of time that we have to discuss it. Number one, I don't think that African American women are referred to maternal fetal specialists the way they should be. And I think that a lot of times, unfortunately, in our profession, we wait until we're in the midst of the storm to try to address the problem, as opposed to getting a weather report, looking for clouds, and then having an umbrella so that, when it starts raining, your umbrella is up. We don't do a lot of prevention. And I think that's a big key.
One question that I have, and Rita mentioned it earlier, the lack of research in this topic. Why isn't there more research? These are alarming statistics. Why isn't the CDC or all the other health agencies, organizations looking at this very serious issue?
I think, number one, because it's not on the radar screen. I don't think that people are screaming about it as loudly as they should, and I really commend Rita, for at least giving a voice to the voiceless. Healthcare has changed. It's gone from from being a profession to an industry, and if the truth be told, it's a statistic that people can just sweep under the rug, using the same diagnosis that Rita has made, obesity, it's socioeconomic. No, it's more than that. It goes deeper than that.
Rita, what is being done to address this problem? I mean, okay, the lack of research, but in New York City, and we have the same problem in California, two large, very powerful, rich states. So what is being done to address this problem now?
Whatever is being done is not enough.
Absolutely.
And I think the first issue is, just as the doctor said, is to acknowledge it. New York City has yet to really acknowledge that it may play a role. By it, I mean its healthcare system. It's not on the shoulders of the black women who are pregnant.
Right.
It's on our shoulders as all citizens. How is our healthcare system delivering care to pregnant black women and women who have given birth? Because many of the deaths occur after birth.
Absolutely.
And that means that they're in the hospital, they're surrounded by medical people, and I think many people would agree with you, Dr. Burke, that there's a storm after the birth, and that people are running around saying, do we have any umbrellas? And, right? And so the mothers are dying. And these are mothers with small children.
Dr. Burke-Galloway, you wanted to add something to this?
Yeah, I think, part of the problem is that we as healthcare professionals, we don't educate the patients. We don't tell them that you might be at risk for certain things. Pregnancy, it is a benign condition. It's a beautiful specialty until things go wrong. And when they go wrong, they go very wrong. And I think that one of the things that we have lacked in terms of obstetricians is really empowering patients with information, so that if your feet begin to swell and you're in your early third trimester, you need to check your blood pressure. We need to basically empower the patients to look for their own red flags, because patients are pretty compliant, at least the ones that I've had. I've been in public health for a long time. And if you tell them these are things that may happen, they look for them, but we don't do that because we're too busy.
Well, what about just basically educating black women about the problem of high blood pressure and some other ailments that can affect their lives and the lives of their unborn babies? Is there enough being done in that realm to cover it?
No.
She'll say no, and I would say no for all mothers, particularly African American. But again, I think the health system is failing them. And I think that racism comes to play, in that the swollen ankles in African American women might not get the same attention as the swollen ankles in a white woman.
I cannot deny that.
And African American women saying, I'm in pain, may not get the same response.
I can definitely agree with that.
So I don't think we need to put this on the shoulders of pregnant African American women. They got a lot going on. It's our job as a nation to assist those who are pregnant to get to a happy delivery. That's one of our goals as a nation. And so what can we do to help?
Unfortunately, we have to leave it at this note. Rita Henley Jensen.
Thank you.
Dr. Linda Burke-Galloway, thanks for joining us.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Love to talk about it.
Still to come on Independent Sources, have things gotten better in Egypt since Mubarak was toppled?
Before that, Marlene Peralta has some other news.
Thanks, Gary. Here's a look at some headlines from the ethnic media. An analysis of classified cables by the Pakistani newspaper Dawn reveals that the United States is trying to shape media coverage in Pakistan. The paper calls the strategy an obsession with the representation in the domestic media. Some of the documents show that the U.S. Embassy regularly sends extracts of commentaries published in the Pakistani press back to Washington. In fact, one of the unpublished cables from the Office of the U.S. Secretary of State from 2009 discusses the critical need to expand available content on radio programming via U.S. government-funded network, Voice of America. And El Diario La Prensa's editorial welcomes the approval of a new immigration law in Mexico. The new law was enacted by President Felipe Calderón. It grants undocumented immigrants passing through Mexico on their way to the U.S. protections they did not have before, as well as access to education and health care services. The law came about because many undocumented immigrants complained that criminals were targeting them for extortion, kidnapping, and human trafficking. The Amsterdam News reports on the closing of a historic Harlem high school after 73 years of educating mostly Black and Latino students. Rice High School held its last graduation last week. The paper notes that members of the board of directors are blaming the closure on economic factors and on a decline in student enrollment. Officials said that the efforts to raise funds to keep the school open also failed. Rice High School was part of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of New York. The school came under fire years ago for a sex abuse scandal and bankruptcy. The 230 students remaining will be transferred to other Catholic high schools. And finally, from the Italian Tribune, a World War II veteran from New Jersey was surprised to receive the French Legion of Honor medal almost 67 years after he returned home from war. Philip Artoricio, who is 88 years old, was among 13 veterans awarded the highest honor France grants to citizens. The award recognizes their eminent service to that country. Those were just a few headlines from the ethnic media. Back to Gary and Vianora in the studio.
Thanks, Marlene. The fall of former Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak was supposed to signal a new beginning for that country. His ouster was the highlight of what became known as the Arab Spring.
But months later, has the country made as much progress as expected? There have been reports of the army trying to silence the press, as well as concerns over religious intolerance in the Arab state.
I spoke with Egyptian reporter Khaled Dawood about some of these issues and progress in the country since that triumphant day in Tahrir Square. Khaled, as the country approaches the much-anticipated democratic elections, is the energy from Tahrir Square revolution still there and still the same?
Well, the energy is still there. The desire to build a free and democratic Egypt is still there. And although we are approaching the parliamentary elections up in September, there's a lot of controversy whether those elections should be held at that date or not. There's an argument by those who took part in the Tahrir revolution that we perhaps need a longer transitional period to give the chance to new parties to emerge, new groups who took part in the revolution. One thing about the Egypt revolution that I'm sure you know very well, Vianora, is that it was a very popular, spontaneous revolution. So there weren't real leaders for that revolt. And so there is this argument, as I said, that some people are saying we should postpone the for a few more months to give a chance for new parties to emerge. Otherwise, we will end up with the same parliament that we had before, or something similar to the parliament that we had before Mubarak was forced to leave office. So that's a very strong debate. Of course, that's not accepted by everyone. The Muslim Brotherhood group, which is the largest previous opposition political group we had, of course, they've always had experience in running for elections, and they're saying, no, we want to run for elections right away in September, according to the schedule that was set earlier by the military council, and others as well, what we call the traditional forces, the traditional families. All these people who had a long experience in running for elections do not want to postpone the elections. So it's very intense debate right now in Egypt, and I don't know exactly how it's going to end. Plus the fact that we don't have a specific date until now, presidential elections thing, and there's a lot of argument and debate and counter debate whether we should have a new constitution first and then proceed with the rest of the elections, or go right away for the elections and after that write the constitution. So there is a division about that too.
How's the media been reacting to the reported attempts by the military to censor criticism of it?
Not happy. It's definitely a worrying thing. I think one of the, and I'm speaking here as a journalist, that's one of the things that we made the revolution against was not to have any more red lines. At one stage, the former president, the ousted president Mubarak, he was a red line, and we cannot criticize him. We cannot criticize his family, and then gradually that was a taboo that we managed to break. Right now, unfortunately, we are facing what seems like a new taboo / red line, that of the army. And as usual, the media people, since we're definitely witnessing more freedom and we're trying to catch up with all what's happening, we're trying to publish all what we know, reflect all the debates, but obviously that's not making the military very happy. And we started seeing what you can call a wave of summoning reporters, some TV presenters like you and me, because of a talk show or something like that. But so far, there hasn't been what you can say punitive measures. It's only been what they call in Egypt to summon you for some coffee. But of course, there's no free coffee. You know, I mean, when the military intelligence people call you and they ask you, please come have a coffee with us, it's not real invitation, you know, because if you refuse the coffee of the military, probably there's going to be some consequences. So it's worrying. I am very worried. I don't want to have a new red line presented in the army. The army decided to side with the people, and they put themselves in the place of decision makers. So as long as they're playing a political role and they're decision makers, they're issuing laws, they're issuing decrees, I think that as journalists, new society, we're entitled to criticize the military or to express reservations about the way they're running the country, exactly like we used to do with the former government or previous regime.
Do these attempts at censorship shed any light on the military's willingness to transfer smoothly power to a civilian role?
Well, I don't really think it sheds light concerning the issue of transferring power to civilian control, as much as it reflects the secret nature of the army itself, and the fact that since the army took over power here in Egypt in 1952, it was not that kind of institution that's issues and affairs are open to the public. And I think that the army officers, probably because of the way they work, the nature of the military themselves, you know, they are used to issuing orders rather than discussion and debate. And, you know, but unfortunately, or what happened, the situation we found ourselves in, is that the army now is playing a political role. So as long as the army is playing a political role, they're taking decisions, they're issuing decrees and laws, even concerning elections and democracy, they should be subject to questioning. And they should not be oversensitive to any kind of criticism and see it as a kind of an attack. And that's really the worrying thing, because there was some statements recently by a senior army figure who's member of the military council, who said, for example, that we follow closely all what's being said about us in the media and the talk shows, and we kind of counted 28 attacks of the Supreme Military Council. And they were not really attacks, they were criticism. That, for example, the military council would issue the parties law, the law organizing how the political parties would work, and not so many people are happy with it. They have reservations about it. So when I express those reservations, it's not criticism of the army, but it's rather, you know, my opinion concerning those things and what's better for the country in the future. So probably the best way out of this is that the army keeps its word concerning the transition period, that they should only stay in office until the end of this year and then hand over power to a newly elected parliament and president. That's why they will not be subject to any criticism of whatsoever kind.
Egypt has always been a stabilizer and moderator in the region between the Arab world and Israel, but now it recently angered Israel by opening its borders with Gaza and facilitating aid into the region. Do you believe New Egypt will have a different stance toward Israel?
I don't think we will have a different stance towards Israel. The military council and the Egyptian government has repeatedly said that Egypt government is committed to all the Camp David agreements and the peace treaties that we've signed with Israel. But I think that what was making the Egyptian people angry was what we saw as a kind of a collusion between the former regime of President Hosni Mubarak and the Israelis in maintaining a very inhumane closure and a very inhumane siege of the Gaza Strip. That's what really made the Egyptian people angry, because we're taking it even from a humanitarian perspective: the right to move, the right to have access to education, the right to have access to health. These are basic human issues. You cannot keep 1.2 million Palestinians locked in a space of 40 kilometers. That's like, what, 25 miles? And tell them, like, you know, you just have to live like that. You can't go out, you can't come in and say that this is good for Israel or good for the peace process in general. And that's why I think the majority of the Egyptians are actually happy that we reopened our border with Gaza. And I think the Israelis know better than anyone else that Egypt continues to maintain restrictions on the movement to Gaza. What was opened is only the movement of human beings. There was no opening for the crossing, moving in like cement or any other material or goods. It's only human beings, students, sick people, people who have visas somewhere else. Those are the people who now can go back and forth. And I don't think, you know, this should be anything that angers Israel. But concerning the movement of goods, the movement of big materials, this has still to go through Israeli checkpoints and checked very well by the Israelis. I don't think the Israeli government should be angry at all with this kind of move.
In the last 15 seconds that we have left, a lot of people in Egypt wanted Mubarak brought to trial, and he will be this summer. Is there confidence now that justice will be served?
To a great extent, I think so. Mubarak deserves to be put on trial for killing over 800 Egyptian demonstrators, for massive corruption by himself and that of his family. It's unbelievable. Egyptians wake up every day and become shocked with the amount of money, with the amount of wealth that our former president and his sons had. So I think that's the minimum we should expect. Yesterday, I was telling you, I was interviewing the former president of Chile, Mrs. Michelle Bachelet, and in Chile, they had an experience of trying the former president there, Pinochet, although he was 90 years old, and she told me something that I liked very much. She said that in Chile, and exactly like in Egypt too, there was an open wound. And before that wound needs to close, you have to clean the dirt. And achieving justice or fulfilling justice is cleaning that wound so that when the wound heals, we build our country and our future on a better basis. I just hope that the trial will be speedy and that the trial will be fair, so that we can prove to the world that if you move from dictatorship to civilian rule, you can also assure for anyone, even the former president, a fair trial in which the entire world will say that it's fair and that he deserved what he got.
Khaled Dawood, you left New York to work as a journalist in the New Egypt. Congratulations on your continuing work, and thank you very much again for your being in studio with us today. Always a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be with you, and best regards to New York.
Thank you.
Thanks.
When we come back, some ethnic music from the underground.
My name's Reggie. Just recently, my wife and I took in her sister's children. Now, we already had 4, so I went from becoming a family man to a man with a bigger family. Now, you can't eat love, so I don't know how I'm gonna feed them tonight. How was that, Rich?
I think I look more like Denzel.
That's cold, man.
Play a role in ending hunger. Visit feedingamerica.org/hunger and find your local food bank.
And finally from us tonight, musicians from all over the country recently came out to audition for the city's Music Under New York program. This year, the MTA received about 250 applications for the 20 available spots.
Producer Sandra Rothbard went underground on the day of the auditions to take a look at how ethnic and cultural roots inspire some of the music.
I'm a lucky one. I can't believe you're in love with me.
For 24 years, musicians have auditioned for the opportunity to perform in the MTA's Music Under New York, or MUNY program.
And with you, I'm not afraid to fly.
While anyone can perform in stations, only a select group of musicians participate in CUNY, which offers free banners, key locations, and additional support. Many of these performers play a variety of ethnic and world music.
We present more than 7,000 musical performances throughout the subway and rail system in New York City. It's a very wide range of musicians who come from all over the world and all over the United States to come to play. So we're looking for a wide variety of musical styles and a very high quality of musicianship. Once you become part of the program and you've auditioned and have been selected to be a member or be part of our roster, then you call in every couple of weeks to tell us when you're available, and we schedule you at one of over 25 different locations in the city.
For years we've been coming down here. We have family who lives down here, and going through the subways we actually hear almost Peruvian type music, and we thought, you know, honestly, it sounds great in the subway, and you got a lot of people coming by, and it seems like a lot of fun.
For some performers, CUNY is an opportunity to launch a music career, pursue a hobby, or fulfill a dream.
I went to Berklee College of Music. I had a scholarship. I'm a professional musician.
Even though we're here in America, it's good to don't forget our roots, where we came from, and it's good that we share the people, with the cultural music, like from Puerto Rico, Santo Domingo, different Spanish countries.
This year, plan on seeing new faces and new music at your subway or train station. For Independent Sources, I'm Sandra Rothbard.
That's our show this week. Thanks for staying tuned.
Until the next time, be independent-minded.